Hard work gets you established, but it's not what grows your career long term. This is something that most professionals eventually realize, but it can be a hard lesson once it's learned. Early in your career, effort is going to be everything. You say yes to projects, you perform above and beyond, and you build your credibility. But at a certain point, career advancement comes from a different place. It comes from positioning, visibility, relationships. I know you don't want to hear it, but it's true. And really the kind of professional and career decisions that end up compounding over time. Yes, compounding like interest. You can be good at what you do and still sense that there's more available to you because you're ready to think more strategically about how your career evolves. Welcome to Control Your Career. I'm Julia Toothacre, your strategic career consultant, and I'm so glad you're here. We are kicking off a new podcast season, and it is all about career leverage. You'll notice that I've been using the term opportunity a lot, and that was originally a term that I wanted to use when it came to my Control Your Career process and talking about opportunities and challenges. Last season, we talked about challenges, and while I wanted this season to be about opportunities, I realized that opportunities wasn't exactly the right word. And so I came up with leverage, and I think that leverage really explains what we're talking about when it comes to your career. We are looking at career growth from a strategic angle because most careers, they don't change through really big moves. Some do, and that's okay. But honestly, they really shouldn't. And we want to be really strategic about where your career is headed without making it a whole thing, right? So your career is going to change through positioning, through consistency, and through some better choices that are going to give you better results over time. That compounding interest that we talked about in the opener. In this episode, I'm going to give you a clearer way to think about how careers actually evolve once you're established. We're going to talk about the shift from execution to leverage and why effort alone is going to stop driving growth at a certain point. And some of you who are more experienced in your careers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. My goal for you is to leave with a more accurate model of how your career is going to compound over time. Again, just like interest. So you can recognize where you're at and what actually needs to change. So let's get started. First, I want to talk about this shift that happens in our careers. There's a point in your career where things start to shift, and I want to help you identify what that can look like. So when we think about our early career is really about effort. It's about what is going to keep you stable. We're building, we're doing all of these different things to get noticed and establish ourselves. But at some point, that is going to shift. We get into that mid and late career, and it really becomes more about positioning. And for some of you out there, I'm using the term positioning, but a lot of times what it looks like is networking, networking within your organization in many cases, though that's not the only way to look at it. In future episodes, we're going to break down positioning a little bit more, but I want you to remember that positioning is really about expanding where you're currently at. It's not about the reactive, but it's really about the proactive. And honestly, most professionals stay in execution mode for too long. And I think what happens is we get comfortable in our position or something's happening. A lot of times I see life happening to people and they don't want more in their career. They want to stay with where they're at. They want somebody to tell them what to do. A lot of times when I see people make a big career shift because they're burnt out or they're just tired of the career that they've been in, they actually shift back into more of an early career thought process and go into an execution focused position, which for some people is fine. They need that to heal, but long term, it's not really going to work out well if you are already in a place in your career where you have been strategic and where you are moving in different ways. So, how do you identify that? Honestly, it's different for everybody. It's a different moment for everybody, but I would say a lot of it comes with just knowing that you're ready to make the shift. I think sometimes we are ready and we choose not to move forward for a lot of reasons. But if you're thinking through all your career transitions, you get to a point where you realize, I'm good at what I do. I know what I'm doing. I've built credibility. I've built trust. I want this next thing. I want this bigger thing, whatever that thing looks like. For a lot of people, it's people management, but in some cases, it can just be growing into a more strategic position. So I will tell you from my experience, I stayed in an effort position for way, way too long. And it was partially because I did not think that I was ready for more. I did not understand positioning at that time. I was somebody that was really good at their job. I excelled. I'm a high performer, and people saw that. But what I lacked was influence. And even though I had some positive influence, I didn't have enough, and I didn't have the influence where it mattered. And so when the time came and change came and new leaders were chosen, my name was not in that hat. And I will tell you, some of that was my own doing, because I did not understand what I needed to be in the position that I wanted to be in at that time in that particular environment. So some of the things that held me back was the way that I had been treated by previous managers in this same environment. It really impacted my confidence. And so even though I had other people telling me that I could lead and take on more and do all these extra positions, I didn't believe it for myself because I was in such a space of, I'm not good enough. What am I doing? All these things that we think when our confidence is torn down. I was also in high burnout at the time. And so there were just a lot of competing things going on in my brain and around me. And what ended up happening for me was it took a friend of mine to actually recommend a position to me and tell me, hey, I think this would be good for you, given what you have already done and where your talents are and where your skills are. And I applied for the position, and it's what I needed to snap out of it. I needed to make that decision to move. And I'm not saying that that's what everybody needs in order to move up or do anything like that. And we're actually going to talk about leveraging within your position. I definitely could have stayed and built that leverage and could have had a different outcome. But given where I was, I knew that I needed a fresh start. And some of you will relate to that. But what I learned from that previous position that I took into the next position was leverage. I understood that even though I did have high execution in that position, I also needed leverage, and I approached that position in a completely different way. And I was able to make different choices, and I was able to accomplish so much more because I understood what leverage was when I went into that next position. So something that I want you to consider as we're going through this episode, are you holding yourself back because you don't know how to leverage your current situation? Or are you truly in a position where you need to continue putting in the effort to build credibility? Understanding where you are between those two will help you understand if you're in a position to really start building on leverage. Okay, I want to go into talking about the distinction between effort and leverage. And I think, again, this will help you define where you are at currently in your career. So we talked a little bit before, early career is really going to reward that effort and that execution. That's what it's about. It's about learning. It's about figuring out who you are as a professional, right? But that mid to senior growth is really going to depend more on leverage and strategic positioning. And I want to make a note here. I use the term effort when it comes to this topic because a lot of managers use that term, and it's something that I hear a lot, especially in early career, is they're wanting that effort. They're wanting their employees to put more of themselves into their career. And I know some of you are going to push back on that, but it's just reality. That's what managers are looking for. And it is about effort, but it's also about execution. I think they need to see the effort and they need to see that you are making things happen. You are doing things, right? It's about how much you can produce, how quickly can you do it, how accurately, but they want to see that you are really trying and moving forward. Some positions, they're going to ride or die based on the execution over the effort. But I think a lot of better people managers will see that you are really trying to make it work and you're trying to understand your position, even if the execution isn't quite there. So you do want to think about that. So leverage is really, again, looking at your career and your positioning from a strategic lens. So it's all about strategy. When I talk about controlling your career, this is it. It's really about how well do you know yourself, and then how much are you leveraging what you have access to in your current position and in your current career situation as a whole. So you're able to really recognize the variables around you, and you can work within them as best you can, again, with what's available to be able to reach those goals, okay? Let's look at more specific differences between execution and leverage. I think this will really drive home what I'm talking about for you in your career, and you can identify for yourself where you are falling into. So first, execution is about delivering within your current position. I think about the phrase staying in your lane. So you're in your role, you stick to that job description, and you are executing on all of those things, and you are checking off all the boxes. Leverage is really about shaping your career and shaping what your role can become. So that's a situation where you are executing on what you need to execute on for your job, but you're looking beyond and you're being able to insert yourself into different positions and projects and conversations to leverage for the future. Execution is going to prove that you can handle what's in front of you. It's building the trust, right? It's really looking at building out those early career pieces so that people understand who you are and what you're about. And they say, oh, look, this person can handle this. They're doing this. They have that execution, right? Leverage is positioning you for what isn't offered yet. So I think about this as positions or promotions that are created for people, that are created for their skill set. And so again, execution is about, I can handle the thing that's put right in front of me, that's in my way. Leverage is really looking at what could be, where could I go, and how can I build something that really works for me and for my strengths and my skill set. In many cases, execution means taking on more work. We see people, especially in early career and sometimes in mid-career, where they are so efficient and so good that they take on more work and take on more work, but they don't take on the right work. Okay, so leverage means choosing the work that's going to change your options in the future. So again, you're more strategic about saying yes to things. You're more strategic about getting on to certain projects and being in the room. Now, I know some of you are going to push back and say, well, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. Then you don't have leverage in your position. And that's what I'm talking about. Your position and where you're at still might be mostly execution, but where can you start to make those shifts in to leverage? And this is one of those ways. So execution is really going to ask, how can I do this well? So that's what you're asking yourself when you're in an execution space in your career. How can I do this well? Leverage is going to be saying, what does this set me up for next? What relationships can I build? What skills can I build? How is this going to help me for the next thing? Some of you will notice your higher level colleagues, some of them get to make choices about what rooms they're in and what projects they're a part of. And that is because they understand leverage. Some of them will be brought into something and they will recuse themselves because they realize that this project or this situation is not going to help them in the future. And they have enough leverage in their career to be able to say no. Execution also builds credibility. Okay, so that's actually a good thing. Again, in that early to early mid career, you want that credibility. That's where your name is getting put out there and people are starting to trust you. So such a good place to be when you have that credibility in your career. But leverage, true leverage, it's going to build range within your career, visibility, and access. That's the difference. We want to use the credibility that you get in the execution stage in order to leverage what is next, build that visibility, and build that access. So these are just sometimes small tweaks that you can start to make early in your career to start building that leverage. So one thing I want you to understand too is both of these things can be happening at the same time. And in most cases, they are happening at the same time. So don't think, oh, I'm only in one and I'm only in the other. If you think about somebody that has switched careers, switched careers or switched companies, there's going to be a period of execution that they have to go through. Even if they were brought in for a strategic role, you still have to understand the company or the new position. There's still going to be a learning curve, and that's where you're in execution. But if you are somebody that understands leverage, then you're also building out leverage at the same time. You're understanding in those early months of that transition who you need to have on your side, who do you need to build relationships with, what projects seem to be impacting, the business, all of that. So you can be both at the same time, and you can be execution and starting to build that leverage, and you should at some point in your career. It's never going to be all or nothing, but if you completely disregard leverage, you are not going to go farther in your career. There are a few situations where execution alone is going to get you the career advancement that you want. All right. I want you to think about it this way. Hard work is admirable. We love it. We love people who work hard. I think those of us who are hard workers, who are high achievers in many cases, we appreciate hard work so much, but it can't be the only thing. You also have to have the strategy. And if you don't understand the strategy for your own career, that's likely where you're going to get stalled out and you're not going to be able to move to the spaces that you want to move in. Okay. Let's talk about this career compounding. Okay. I talked about this right in the beginning where I talked about, different situations that are going to compound your career. Very, very similar to compound interest, if you understand that. So career compounding is going to be the long-term impact of what you are consistently building. Okay. You are consistently building something in your career, depending on who you are. And then it can also be reflective of what you have neglected. So the more that you put into something, the more it's going to compound. So the more that you stay in execution mode, the more people are going to pull you for execution, and you're not going to be able to move away from it. If you get known for something specific, you're going to be known for that thing. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it can weaken your leverage if you don't understand how to move within the different systems that are around you. Okay. Career compounding is the way that your skills, your reputation, your visibility, and your decisions all build on each other over time. They're going to shape who you become in your career and what is next and what is available to you. So as we move through this season, you're going to hear me talk about career compounding because that's a lot of what we're doing. We're building on all of these things so that you can be strategic and move into the spaces that you want to be in. Now, is this a foolproof thing? No, there's always going to be different barriers and things that we have to overcome. That's where our realistic reality comes in. We have to be so real about the situations that we are in so that we understand the leverage that we have in the future and moving forward. Okay. Building on all of that, I want to talk about leverage buckets. Okay. So this is really about the areas that you can leverage within your career. So that is what we're going to go in depth with throughout this entire season are these leverage buckets. And in the next episode, I'm actually going to help you identify where you do have leverage in your career for all of these different areas. So the different leverage buckets that we're going to be unpacking: skill range, reputation, always big one, visibility, something that most people are not doing well at, I can tell you that. Market awareness, which is huge right now, and unfortunately not very positive for many people, though there are some bright spots here and there. And then decision quality. That one's going to be, I think, really hard for some of you where you've made some poor decisions and we have to figure out how we can make better decisions moving forward. So again, this is what I'm going to be talking about in the next episode, unpacking all of these 5 things to help you understand what you're already leveraging and where you can leverage in regard to these topics. One thing to remember is you don't have to be perfect at all of them. I know some of you are going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't have visibility. That's going to be my weakest. That's okay. We want to help you leverage what you do have. And then we want to help you understand what those gaps are. You likely are going to have a couple of leverage buckets that are going to be stronger than others. So how can we leverage those more, but also understand where some of the gaps are going to be? And do we need to put more time into that? At the end of the day, this is really about moving from awareness to intentionality. This idea of controlling your career. You understand what is real. You understand what is happening. You understand yourself. You understand your strengths and your limitations. And then you're able to move forward and make strategic, intentional decisions about your career because you understand all of those things. So as we're having these strategic conversations, you need to understand that every role that you have had and every role that you will have moving forward is shaping you into something. And sometimes we choose that path and we've built the leverage to make decisions, good or bad. But in some cases, we've let our career happen to us. And when that happens, a lot of times we end up making poor decisions because we're relying on other people's perception of us versus who we are and what we actually need. So you want to think about where you have been to understand where you want to go. We are trying to help you get aligned in your career and then be strategic about what is next. It's important to remember that you do not have to overhaul everything. I know a lot of people are in a space where they want to do that. They want to just blow everything up, and they want to overhaul their life. And in some cases, I think it's great and it works out. For most people, there has to be a level of stability in their career, and it makes it really hard to make a massive transition like that. You have to be in a very specific space in your life and in your career to have the privilege to be able to make really big overhaul your life type career decisions. But at the end of the day, you still need clarity. You still need direction. You still need to understand what's possible and what you can leverage. And I can guarantee for most of you, there is more leverage than you think. You just have to identify it and then move forward with it. Okay. Your career is going to evolve either way. The main question is whether or not you're directing that evolution or if you're just letting it happen to you. Okay. I want to leave you with some practical questions that help you move from execution to leverage in your career. So first, what kind of problems do you want to be trusted with in 3 years? What rooms do you want access to? What level of influence do you want to have? And what kind of professional do you want your current work to be shaping you into? These are really practical questions that you can start to think about, you can start to reflect on to help you move forward, to help you figure out what leverage can look like and where you have some opportunities. You don't have to answer all of those today, but definitely take some time to think about it, maybe journal, talk to a friend. Just make yourself aware of where you're at. So as you move through this week, pay attention to what you're building in your career, not just what you're doing day to day. I know sometimes that's really hard, especially if you're in a burnout stage or you're overwhelmed or there are just other competing priorities in life, but just try to pay attention to what you're building. Where is your skill range expanding? Where's your reputation strengthening? Where are you increasing that visibility and trust? And remember, we're going to dive deeper into all of these, but I want you to start thinking about it now. Remember that growth does not always require a big dramatic change, and most people really can't do that in their life, right? Growth is about compounding what you're already doing and combining it with strategic positioning. That is the leverage that you have. If this conversation sparked something for you, stay with me this season. We are going to keep building on this idea of leverage calmly, strategically, in a way that's going to help expand your options without forcing you to start over. We're not blowing it up, I promise. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, I'd love it if you would so that you don't miss out on future episodes that we've got coming your way. Please share this episode with somebody that you think would benefit from it. We're also going to be adding a lot of extra resources into the show notes and blog posts this season, just to give you additional resources that I have, past podcast episodes, all of that, just so that you can continue to dig deeper within your career. And then finally, please subscribe to my email list to stay up to date on strategic career information. I'll see you next time, and remember, you control your career.